So I'm finally back with season 2 of the Missing Conversation interviews. And this month, for Black History Month, we are saluting our sisters. And the way that I've decided to do this is to interview some of the Black women in the legal industry that I personally really, really admire. In today's episode, I'm going to be interviewing the lovely Gillian Boateng. Hopefully, you get some nuggets from this. Let's get straight into the interview.
Fantastic. So today we've got the lovely Gillian Boateng with us here. I'm super excited to have you actually because I've been following you on LinkedIn and I quite like your posts. I've been like a little secret like supporter in the background. So I'm really happy to have you here. I feel so honored. Could we kick it off by maybe you just telling us a little bit about your legal journey to date? So how did you get a training contract? Did you kind of go down the VAC scheme, straight TC route, all of that sorts of stuff? Give us the tea. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm really honored that you've actually asked me to be on your podcast. So thank you for having me. But yeah, my journey was not conventional. So I had always had some interest in a career in law. So I had done kind of a short summer work experience whilst I was at school. But once I got to university, I decided not to study law because I'd been told that you didn't need to study law to become a lawyer. And instead, I went on to study philosophy, politics, and economics. And whilst I was at university, I went, for context, I went to the University of Oxford. And whilst I was at university, I took it upon myself to try and get a better understanding of other kind of industries, just because I was coming back from a working class background. Neither of my parents had been to university. And so I kind of had to take it upon myself to try and understand what, bankers do or consultants do and etc. So actually, whilst I was at university, I didn't focus on law, which meant that I didn't do any kind of vacation schemes or anything like that in any law firms. Instead, I did like banking internships, tech internships, consulting internships, that type of thing. And then when I graduated from university, I did another internship in a bank, got offered a graduate role, and so was due to start in my banking graduate role shortly after I graduated. There was kind of an interim period of a few months. And during that interim period, I worked at SEO London. So during university, as kind of my attempt to understand all these different industries, I had been part of the SEO London platform and other organizations like Rare Recruitment, etc. And so whilst I was working at SEO London, I said in passing that when I was younger, I was kind of interested in law, but I hadn't really pursued it. So maybe one day it might be something that I might come back to. And at the time, they were processing kind of all their law program applications. So they said, well, just add your CV, see what happens. Obviously, you've got your job coming up soon, but this will just help you prepare for when you're eventually ready. So I did add my CV, started kind of attending things with SEO London or events with their partner law firms. And one of the applications that I made was to a Magic Circle law firm, and they ended up offering me a training contract. Now, by the time I'd received my offer, I'd actually started my job in this bank. And so I had to kind of break the news to my new boss that, I think this is a great job, but I've just been offered an opportunity that I just can't let go because it's something that I'd always kind of dreamed about. They were going to pay for my law school. I'd then have a job afterwards to go and train. Like it just sounded, for me, it was just a dream come true, if I'm being honest. So I explained it to him and he was very understanding and very supportive, my boss at the time. So I left that bank within a few months of starting and then went on to law school and then went and did my training contract.
That is really interesting. This is the first time I'm hearing this story, so that's actually really interesting for me as well, right? And I want to take it back a little bit to when you mentioned working at SEO London and then also being part of like Rare Recruitment and other kind of organizations like that. And one of the themes of this Black History Month, sorry, for Success with Steph is looking at the concept of mentoring, like how important it is, especially for Black aspiring lawyers. And I suppose where you can actually find some of these resources. So I know you mentioned SEO London, you mentioned Rare. I guess, first of all, how important do you think mentoring is? I guess just generally, and then also specifically for Black aspiring lawyers, how important do you think it is? And then follow-up question, what kind of organizations would you recommend?
I mean, I think mentoring is so important for anyone. just kind of first point is that it just makes your journey a little bit easier because it gives you some insight into what your own journey could look like and how to navigate certain things. So from my perspective, I think mentoring is so helpful. And so having organizations like SEO London, Rare Recruitment, Aspiring Solicitors, 10,000 Black Interns, etc., all those different organizations, I think are so important, especially for people who are coming from backgrounds where perhaps you don't have very easy access to people in various industries who can kind of coach you or just even tell you about what they do in their jobs. So for me, I think mentoring has been super helpful. And, you know, the organizations I've mentioned, I know there are many others. I've heard, for example, of Grow Mentoring, and there are many others. So I think if you do get the opportunity to be mentored by someone, for me, I found it super helpful. So I'm hopeful that, you know, other people will find mentoring helpful.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess a slightly controversial, perhaps, question. You've used mentoring, you found it helpful, right? I myself have also been through many of these organizations. So I was a Rare Recruitment candidate, also used Aspiring Solicitors, also used SEO London. So well versed in a lot of these mentoring organizations. And obviously I am where I am today. Like I'm now currently an associate, you're a qualified lawyer, that sort of thing. So to what extent do you think that once you have, I guess, used these mentoring resources, kind of got to where it is that you want to get to what extent is it your duty, quote unquote, to give back to those coming behind you who also need the same kind of support, or maybe even more support?
I mean, for me, speaking about me personally, I've always felt that it's my personal responsibility to give back to people that are coming up behind me. Yeah. I know how much mentoring has helped me personally, and it's just not in my nature to kind of take and not give back. Yeah. I'm hopeful that what I've learned through my journey, which is part of the reason why I kind of share content on LinkedIn, on YouTube, etc. I'm hoping that what I've learned and the way in which people invested in me, I can do the same for other people. That doesn't have to apply to everyone. And I think, you know, I think the word duty is heavy. I think everyone has to think about what they're comfortable doing. And especially again, coming from an underrepresented background. So it might be, say you come from working class background, or you're Black or whatever. I think sometimes you may feel pressure to be the one to coach the next generation. And I don't think that's fair, because ultimately some of the issues that we're dealing with are beyond the people that are affected by them, right? So we hear about kind of social kind of structures or whatever it is that might mean that things are biased in a certain way. It's why we have all these diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And I think if there is an automatic assumption that the people who are affected by these issues are the ones that then need to correct them, then we're still kind of perpetuating the problem. So I will speak for myself and say, I personally feel like I have a duty to give back, but I don't think it should ever be an automatic assumption that anyone has to do this. Obviously, it's nice, and I'm sure people will appreciate it. But like I said, I don't think it can be an automatic assumption.
Yeah. And I think it's good that you said that, because you're right. Sometimes you can feel that, you know, because you are in a particular place and maybe you have been blessed in I guess, in a sense, it is, there is a lot of pressure, I guess, alongside all of the other things you need to do. So if you're currently working, obviously you've got your 9 to 5, which is never really a 9 to 5, but you've got your 9 to 5 to deal with. And then you probably, you know, you've got family, you've got friends, you've got all those other things. And then you've now got the whole section of the community that you're also supposed to support if you feel that kind of pressure, right? So I completely understand the dichotomy of, on the one hand, having that personal conviction to want to just help because you received that help, but then also making sure that you can balance it as much as possible to make sure that you don't burn out, because if that's not your actual job description, it's not your duty to do it, right? If you choose to do it, it's fine, it's volunteering, it's great, it's up to you, but there should be no requirement, I guess, for you to do that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And actually, it brings me to a question that I was asked recently about whether I get involved in all these diversity, equity, and inclusion things because I want to or because I feel the need to. And for me, I think it's a balance that I need to try and find, because as I said before, I am personally passionate about these things. I also often reference my children in that they are also an extra motivation for me, because I don't want them to have to experience some of the things that I or my peers have had to deal with. But also, I'm an employment lawyer. So some of these issues, I kind of have an interest from a professional perspective because they touch on the work that I do in my day job, i.e. discrimination, whistleblowing, etc. But I have to find the balance between being passionate about it. It kind of touches on my job, but it's not really my main 9 to 5. And then that overlay of taking on too much responsibility, which may then impact your ability to, for example, do client work, which is what actually, you know, has a lot of impact on your progression, your billable hours targets, and all that type of stuff. So it's finding that balance between your passion, something that relates to your job, but also if you take on too much, it can impact how much you're able to dedicate to other parts of your job. And obviously doing diversity, equity, and inclusion and all that type of stuff is helpful even from a progression perspective, because your firm, if, for example, you're a lawyer, will appreciate the fact that you're not purely focusing on your billable hours, and that beyond that, you're also supporting the firm in terms of culture and other extracurricular activities. But again, I think it comes down to, one, being honest with yourself about how much you are able to commit, because the reality is it can be emotionally sensitive and perhaps triggering for some people. So how much you are comfortable doing, and balancing that with kind of what is the right expectation given the position that you're in. So yeah, I think it's a difficult balance to strike, but it's an important one to strike.
Yeah, and I guess that leads me quite nicely to my next question, which you've kind of touched on, but I'll ask it anyway in case you have any more specific examples. If you are someone who kind of, like yourself, you've decided that that's your kind of personal conviction, so you want to help, you want to support, you want to give back, what kind of advice or tangible tips would you give to someone in that position to kind of make sure that they are striking that balance? They're not going to burn themselves out by, you know, giving too much of themselves to people in the community, but they're still able to kind of balance all of their other commitments as well.
I would say, like I said before, it is a difficult balance to strike. But for example, if you find that automatically every time there's, like, say, Black History Month, or there's kind of a Black network, and you are automatically assumed to be helping, then it might be that you need to manage expectations and just kind of, and you have to be sensitive about it, because you don't want it to appear as though you're not kind of a team player and you don't want to support the firm in other areas. But I do think you, like I said, have to manage expectations about what is immediately your responsibility to pick up. And similarly, for example, when it comes to, you know, employee resource groups, like, for example, a Black network or other networks for various groups, sometimes you may feel like I should go and be the chair, or I should be on the steering committee, or whatever. And if that's what you want to do and you feel like you can balance that with kind of your day job, then by all means. But be mindful of what that responsibility may come with, but also the other things that you can't see that it comes with, like the additional meetings or the other responsibilities that evolve over time and become kind of bigger than you anticipated. So I think, it's just about managing expectations and being mindful about the responsibilities that you're taking on and how they then impact your ability to do what is actually your day job and will affect your progression more so perhaps than other areas.
Yeah, completely agree with that. Completely agree. And I guess we've spoken a lot about, I guess, managing expectations to ensure that you can still kind of progress as you need to. And I think that's a good way to kind of segue into just generally the topic of growth and development as a lawyer, as a Black lawyer. So I guess my first question for you would be looking at, how did you kind of take charge of your growth and development once you were employed, once you started working?
I think there were a couple of different ways. First of all, employee resource groups, finding other people, especially if they're more senior, but even if they're your peers and they're the same level, so say years qualified as you, other people, not only within kind of the, say for example, if you're a Black associate, not only within the Black network, because the reality is you're more likely to find, given the numbers of Black people in law firms, you're probably going to find mentors in other groups or sponsors in other groups than only the Black networks. I think, first of all, just staying open-minded about who you're willing to be mentored by, which hopefully shouldn't be an issue anyway. But yeah, just networks and networking with people in those groups or networks, and trying to establish relationships with them. I often find that the best mentoring relationships are those that are a bit more authentic and a bit more organic. Yeah. So if you're able to build natural rapport with people, and then hopefully through that process, you'll learn kind of tips from various people. So I think building relationships with people first and foremost, not only within your team, but also within the kind of wider context of your firm. Yeah. And then I've personally also found networks outside of work or outside of my firm that can also be super helpful. So for example, we have, for example, the Black Council Forum coming up, and this is the second year that it's running. I attended the first time and found it super helpful just in terms of understanding how particularly senior people have managed to navigate their journeys, and also, again, networking with people across the legal industry, who have had similar experiences because they're from a similar background. So I think combining kind of support that comes internally and also support that might be available externally, for me has been super, super helpful.
Yeah. I think when I was an aspiring solicitor, I didn't always know that some of these kind of programs were available for aspiring solicitors as well. I thought they were only for like if you're already qualified, if you already have a job, that sort of thing. But a lot of these programs do actually have streams for if you're trying to get into the profession. So it's still definitely worth looking out for, and then you can start to kind of build your network early in that sense. So yeah, I would definitely recommend things like that as well.
But certainly I believe the Black Solicitors Network, for example, is open to aspiring solicitors. And then especially for aspiring solicitors, you have, as I mentioned before, your SEO Londons, Rare Recruitments and others like that. So there are definitely networks out there, and even law firms have programs for aspiring solicitors, don't they? So there are definitely things out there. You just have to be proactive in terms of doing your own research, but also trying to network with other people. And I've personally found that one of the best ways that I've been able to do that is through LinkedIn. I know some people find that very uncomfortable, but if you are able to get over that, uncomfortable element, you find that actually people are very open to, well, not everyone, but a lot of people are open to being contacted and sharing their experience. So, it's a free resource, where you can just find people who may be open to sharing their experience with you. So that's something that you might be willing to try.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for the advice. Switching it up a little bit, let's talk about one of the most common questions that I typically get asked, and I think a lot of people often want to know about work-life balance. Yeah. Being a lawyer is obviously a very demanding career, just generally, whichever aspect of law you decide to go into. So a lot of people are always asking, how do you manage certain things? How do you manage, let's say, having a family alongside hours, alongside anything else you might decide to do outside of work and family, right? So how do you personally go about kind of managing your work-life balance? Do you feel like you have a work-life balance?
I think so. Okay, so for anyone who's watching, who, just for context, I am a working mum. I have 2 young children. My eldest is 5. And I had my first child whilst I was a trainee solicitor. So my journey in this career path has been unusual. And I think just not even specific to corporate law or this industry. I think for any working parent, they will say trying to find that balance is not easy, and what that balance should look like at any given point is different because the kids are growing up, what they need is changing, what you need is changing, what your career is demanding is changing. So finding that so-called balance is not easy. But and so I've been in this industry for 7 years. I've been a mum for 6 of those years. The way in which I've tried to manage it is, first of all, I think I've been lucky that for a lot of my time, and I will be transparent and caveat this and say you will always find people that don't understand what you're doing, right? And sometimes it's not going to go smoothly, is the reality. But for most of my time in the industry, I've been very lucky to be around people who have understood what it takes to juggle all of what it takes to juggle being a working parent, and have been willing to support me and guide me and help me get through that. So for example, I remember at my first firm that I qualified, there was a very senior partner in my team who, as soon as I came back from maternity leave, was literally like, I'm going to mentor you. I want to support you. I want to make sure that you're able to kind of juggle all of this. And I can't tell you how much that changes everything for you, because to have such a senior person go out of their way to say, I'm gonna support you in this process, it just makes such a huge difference. And to know that people are rooting for you within your team and senior people. And she wasn't the only one that kind of would be mentoring me, etc. So I think the first thing is to make sure that you're in a team and in a firm that understands and is willing to support so-called work-life balance. Again, it's difficult to find that balance, but at the very least, if you're working with people that can help you and can support you and are understanding of your personal circumstances, that is the first thing. I think the next thing is, outside of work, to have a great support network. I'm so grateful for the people that I have around me who are just so, they're very much helping me to continue with my career. So the first person is my husband, right? He I won't speak a lot about him because he's a very kind of private introvert, but he is brilliant. And I mean, they're his children as well, so hopefully you'd expect that he'd be great with his own kids. But even from a personal standpoint of also supporting me in my career, fantastic. And I'll give you an example. Like I said before, when I was pregnant with my first child, and also once I'd had her, I was still a trainee. So once I got back from maternity leave, I was working full time. And he said, I'm going to basically do kind of the heavy lift with our daughter in terms of dropping her at nursery, picking her up, sorting her out in the evenings with baths and all that type of stuff, so that you can just focus on just qualifying. Go and spend however many hours you need to spend at work, do whatever you need to do and qualify. And having someone that, and I know how hard that is being a parent, like kind of taking all that responsibility, and to have someone that was willing to do that meant that I could focus on my career and kind of reach that next stage. So I think, and then I have other people like my mum who helps us with childcare. We have nursery. We have other friends and family who, they all do their bits and pieces, right? Sometimes my mum will just come and give us food like at home, which saves me or saves us having to cook. It's those small things, but also the larger things that we have such a brilliant support network that I'm so grateful for, that help to make everything tick along. And like I said, I don't have this like perfectly figured out at all by any stretch. So I'm not even going to try and pretend. It is hard, but I've managed to kind of continue with, getting along and making it work so far because of, one, the people I would say that I've worked with for the most part, and then the people I have outside of work that support me as well. So people ultimately.
Perfect, but it sounds like you're doing really good. So I think people could definitely learn from what you said, because it does sound, maybe internally like how difficult it is, if that makes sense, but on the outside looking in, you're looking great. So from you, I think that's amazing. Thank you. Okay, that's really good. So I guess the other question that a lot of people tend to have, alongside obviously work-life balance in terms of like family and then work, what about in terms of side hustles? And with side hustles, this can range from anything to having a fully fledged business to just trying to post consistently on LinkedIn, for example, because whilst that might seem like it's just opening up your phone and typing some words, it takes time, right? So even with doing something like that, how do you kind of, I guess, create systems to make sure that you have a balance so that you can kind of keep everything ticking along?
Yeah, and I mean, when I started posting on LinkedIn, for me, it wasn't, and to be honest, I still don't see it as a side hustle. I see it, for me, it's just a way that I, one, give back, because it helps me to give back to my community in terms of supporting aspiring solicitors and more junior lawyers. But two, also networking with other people within my industry and also other industries. And then three, I can talk about issues that I care about. So diversity, equity, and inclusion and all that type of stuff. So for me, it's more of an outlet rather than a side hustle, I would say. And the way in which I keep it going is, first of all, I have very, very easy kind of expectations. Like, I don't set the bar very high in terms of what I'm trying to achieve with it. And the reason why I do that is because, like you said, we work in a demanding industry. I also have a young family. For me, I don't want to set myself up to fail. So, for example, one of my goals is that I post on LinkedIn once a week. And actually, and I don't necessarily have to sit down for like a day and really plan out a post. Quite often it will just come to me, like I'll just be, on the train or something, and I'll just think of something and I'll just write something in my notebook, and then I might come back to it later. And over time, you start to build a collection of these random thoughts, as it were, that you flesh out and develop, and then you kind of build up a bank that you can then post every week. And because I've only my goal is to just do it once a week, for me it's very manageable. Obviously, what is a bit more time consuming is YouTube, which I started a couple of months ago, and I'm trying to kind of put systems in place so that, and for anyone who's watching, I'm currently on a career break. So for me at the moment, this is very manageable, but I'm very conscious that very soon I will be going back to work. So I need to set it up in a way that means I can continue to produce the content that I want to produce. And so, for example, I don't edit my videos myself, because whilst I would love to be able to learn that now, I know that when I go back to work and I'm working late and I have to come back and help with the kids, or I have XYZ going on, and then at the weekend I'm obviously catching up with the kids and sorting everything else out, for me, just knowing that I have a reliable editor that will sort out my videos is helpful. So I may not absolutely need them right now, but I know I will need them down the line. And in a similar way, for example, we have someone that helps us out once a week in my home and helps with cleaning. Again, I could do that myself, especially at the moment whilst I'm on a career break, but we need these systems in place, because the truth is you can't do it all. Like, there's only so many hours in a day. So where I feel that I can outsource certain elements, and I'm very grateful for the privilege to be able to do that, then I do. And then again, try and create kind of structure and also very manageable goals and targets that mean that I can do things consistently, and hopefully with that consistency, I can build on that and see where it takes me. So yeah.
I like that. And I mean, it sounds like you're setting a really good foundation to make sure that you're set up for success when everything does come back to kind of being, 5 plates having to spin at the same time. So I think that's really, really good. And that's definitely something that people can take away from that. So that's really cool. I guess final question, and this can kind of tie up everything we've spoken about in terms of the importance of mentoring, in terms of, I guess, setting up systems and managing your time and managing expectations. What advice would you give to either junior Black lawyers or aspiring Black lawyers when it comes to wanting to further their career development, when it comes to wanting to kind of get that job, when it comes to wanting to be successful? What advice would you have for them? What would you say is the most important thing?
I think the first thing I would say is, we hear all these statistics about kind of what it's like for Black lawyers across the profession, but especially in areas such as corporate law. You hear about, for example, the Extents report, which talks about the 1%. And I think it's helpful to understand these statistics, but I often say, don't let that be the forefront of your mind, because the reality is, whilst I think it's also important to be aware of what these statistics are and kind of what the usual issues are, so that you can be prepared and you can also understand how other people might have navigated that if you're also to face a similar issue. The truth is, they can sometimes be a bit discouraging, and it might make you feel like, am I even supposed to be here? Am I wanted in the industry? Will I succeed? So for me, I think it's trying to strike that balance between being aware of what the issues other people have faced are, but not allowing that to hold you back, or to make you feel like you don't stand a chance, or you don't deserve to be here, or you can't go for it. My view is, I often describe it as I choose to be naive about certain things, in that, okay, you've told me, I understand, I'm aware of what the issues are, but I'm going to pretend like for now, when I'm focusing on this particular goal, I'm going to put that to one side, because it's not going to, obviously you need to address any issues in that circumstance if you need to, but ultimately I need to just try and go for it. I can't let these statistics prevent me from even trying. So again, I think it's finding that balance between being aware of what the issues are, but not allowing them to hold you back. Yeah. So that's the first thing. And then I think the second thing is building your network, building your support network, and people that can mentor you, people that can sponsor you. And again, you may have covered this in a previous video, but mentors being people that will guide you and coach you and help you figure out your career, and sponsors who will effectively put their reputation on the line to say you should promote or further this person's career. And I think finding those networks within your firm, within other external networks, whoever that might be, is going to be crucial. And especially given what's happening within the industry, both within firms, but also externally in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancies or kind of other networks, there are so many people on the ground doing the work to try and help improve the situation for, or improve kind of progression prospects for Black lawyers. So I would say make the most of those networks, make the most of the support that is available, and know that people are rooting for your success. We all want to see you do well, and you know, many of us are happy to share our learning, so reach out to people, network with people. But yeah, I would say obviously it's a given that you need to work hard, you need to be reaching your targets, you need to deliver very good pieces of work, you need to be available, etc., etc. So I haven't mentioned those because I'm assuming everyone's going to be doing that anyway. But in terms of in terms of feeling like you are a Black person, how do I progress given this particular characteristic that I have, and not even taking into account kind of intersectionality. So you might be a Black woman with a long-term health, like just focusing on the Black element. Like I said before, try not to let the statistics discourage you, still go for it, but also make the most of the support that is available both within your firm and externally. And hopefully a combination of the two will mean that over time you will progress. And the reality is things are getting better, right? They're not perfect by any stretch, and we would love for things to get better more quickly, but we are seeing an improvement in the number of people, Black people, entering into the profession, and we can only hope that over time we'll start to see that improvement at the most senior end as well. So yeah, don't be discouraged, but make the most of the support that is available to you, is what I would say.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. And that's definitely a tip for me as well. So I will definitely be using that. Thank you. Just to wrap up then, where can people find you if they want to find out more? So I know you've mentioned YouTube, you've mentioned you post on LinkedIn. What's your YouTube handle?
My YouTube handle is just my name, so at Gillian Boateng. And then I'm also Gillian Boateng on LinkedIn. You'll probably most easily find me on LinkedIn, and there's a link to my YouTube channel on my LinkedIn profile. So come and connect with me, follow the page, send me a message, whatever, leave a comment. I'd love to kind of speak to people. As I said, it's very important to me to give back, but also just to network with other people. So yeah, I'm very happy to speak to people. Please come and connect with me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This has been really great.